I would say there's two branching paths. There's one, which is it's a complex system, and therefore the connection between that complex system should be as simple as possible. Or alternatively, I guess this goes back to some of your previous questions of what we're seeing, but the math is becoming so much easier to say, like, then why do we need 19 spokes? Why don't we just build one better hub?
Welcome to the AI Advantage, where modern leaders decode the future of tech. I'm Solomon Williams, founder of Solanox. So here, it's no noise, no hype every week. Sometimes it's just me, and sometimes it's the brightest minds in tech, breaking down what it really takes to grow smarter with AI and automation. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the AI Advantage. I'm your host, Solomon Williams. So we have a special guest with us today. We have Justin. He's with Switchboard. He's the co-founder for Switchboard. So Justin, thank you so much. I was really excited to have you on today. So, just to kind of start off, I think it's going to be such a engaging conversation, but can you just let the audience know a little bit about yourself, who is Switchboard, and we can kind of go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just redid our website to match with what we've already been doing kind of with different clients and companies. But what we've come to call ourselves is an AI deployment studio, because I think there's a lot of transformation theater of, boards and CEOs saying, we need AI. And then I chat with those people and I say, what does that mean to you? And they're like, we don't know. So our goal is to deploy AI for folks through the lens of their business operations. So helping people get time back. There's, a ton of busy work that I think people do that no one signed up for, no one dreamed of growing up, moving, cells around spreadsheets and moving emails between different people all day. So our goal is to come into a company, understand how they work, where AI can actually be useful and helpful, and then build that for them. So that's what we do Switchboard wise. And previous to that, me and my co-founder worked at a product design firm called MetaLab, where we got to build and design products with some really talented people. We didn't do it ourselves, but helping manage projects and operations of that business. And then before that, I was at IBM, is where I kind of cut my teeth on large scale deployment and software development and IT deployment.
So with that, where did Switchboard, come back? Because obviously you worked with such talented teams. You came from IBM. You worked when you were able to really get the sense of working on these larger enterprises. So where was the catalyst, the kickoff to have you and your co-founder have it to where it's like, hey, this is something that's lacking in the market right now for the folks and that we can probably provide?
Yeah. When I was at IBM, I think I got to learn as much what not to do as what to do, because, you'd have a meeting about a decision that could have been an email 3 weeks ago. And there's a lot of great things learned there, but I got to see that like enterprise is just, this is soul sucking. And then working at a product design firm that works with really cool startups, really cool tech companies, was great to see the inside of those companies. But we ourselves were, when I joined, about 40-ish people. And when I left, we were, I think, nearing 200. And so we ourselves were not a huge company, but I was given the freedom by having a wonderful kind of leadership team that I reported to use Zapier, to use Airtable when these tools were first coming out, and getting to see it doesn't have to be this way in terms of, the business runs on 40 spreadsheets and one CRM that maybe 3 or 4 people out of the 10 who should be filling it in and keeping it up to date actually do it. And so it became very obvious that businesses that aren't giant enterprises with huge budgets, or, on the other end of the spectrum, a startup with 1 or 2 people who don't need all these systems, there's a huge amount of companies in between who don't know a better way. And so that was kind of the catalyst of getting to do that myself, and my co-founder getting to do that for many years. We wanted to bring that to more companies, kind of this more modern way of operating. That kind of no code, low code era shifted very quickly. And that's when Switchboard and all of this kind of era that we're in started when ChatGPT launched, because it became very obvious to me, at least, in terms of, well, you've got the automation side and then pair that with the AI side, and those two are going to converge into being able to do a hell of a lot more with a hell of a lot less time and effort spent on busy work. So that's where it kind of came from.
It's because I'm always thinking of, in terms of when you got first started, and I hear this, even from smaller business owners, AI is here. There's a lot of hype around it, right? Of automation and AI and where to get started. So even now, like from the beginning and where you're seeing now in the market, where are you seeing with when people hear workflows and people hear, where did they get started? Where when you worked with companies before on the B2B side, starting, is the problem still the same on you having to educate them, or now has it gotten to a point now that where they do understand they're having there's all these CRM tools, but it's spread out across, there's so many different tools, and now they just want a singular unified approach. What have you seen right now? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Like, I think to your point, there's more desire for a single source of truth. People are sick of the software sprawl, and the sentiment I keep hearing from people that we chat with who are interested in becoming clients is always starts with, well, I don't know what AI can do. I have a piece of software that is now telling me we've been working together for 10 years and now we have AI, but they've never really solved our workflows. So why would I trust them now? And my team is nervous about this because they don't know what it means for us as a company, them in their role. And so there's just a lot of fear, which is still being amplified by a lot of uncertainty and doubt, fueled by a lot of snake oil. And I think Agents is a great example of that. Agents, most people think is some mythical silver bullet product they can install, and they don't realize it's really a framework of how AI can and can't work. You can spin up an agent in Claude Code by just saying, spin up a sub agent to QA what you just did. And yes, there are products around it, but I think there's just so much confusion and overwhelm. So to your question, a lot of it is education for non-technical leaders that we chat with, which is the bulk of business leaders are very non-technical. So it usually starts with education, but very quickly getting them to understand it's not really about the fancy technology and the acronym soup and snake oil. It's about, where is your business wasting time on things that could be automated, and getting them thinking through that lens tends to be very clarifying for everyone.
So, because I was looking through Switchboard and kind of you guys' process of it. And, you first, of course, you have to do a gap analysis. You have to do an assessment. How does the business function? What are the kind of the funnel or the architecture, so if you will, like, of how a process goes. So when you get there, how does it work with your team and so forth? That's that usually that you see that most companies from on the guard that they're missing. Is it just them not understanding as they continue to grow, like it becomes more sprawl, or is it them not really not knowing the end product of what they want? Like, help us, the audience, like, work through what you guys have seen when you kind of work through that analysis.
Yeah, I am very anti-management consultant. So our goal is not to end, a strategy engagement with, here's 150 page of decks. Good luck. Our goal is to help them build it, but more so we work on kind of a prototype format. So our output is often, well, here's what the single source of truth would look like, and here's how it would function and what AI functionality would be in it. But to your question of how do we get there, we come into depending on how broad they want to go, but often we'll come through every department and meet with some folks who are ICs. Our goal is to, and maybe this is a tip for folks thinking about AI, is don't just start with leadership of departments who aren't in the work every day, who may not know the nuance of, well, these are the edge cases or the things that usually come up in our business, whatever your business might be. You want to talk to the people who are in the weeds, executing on the work, because the goal is to understand, what are the edge cases? What are the things that go wrong? What are the secrets that leadership doesn't know, which is often that, well, yes, we have a CRM, but 5 different people have 5 different roles that come out of, when in a CRM, someone gets to a closed won state, finance probably has a job coming off of that, some sort of services team, maybe customer support, project management, whatever it might be. All those people tend to export something from a CRM and they go create a spreadsheet over here. They add some data points to a different system over there. And so getting us understanding how the data flows through a business helps us understand and explain back, like, you can't add AI to 19 spreadsheets that all have different information and live on people's hard drives. You can add it to that CRM, but then what do you do with it? So the goal is to understand, what is the process? What are the edge cases of the process, as in where do things go wrong, or what are the secret workarounds that people don't know about in the leadership? And then understanding their data and how does that data flow through. And that usually paints a very clear picture of, therefore, if you view a business as, to overly simplify, if you view it as an assembly line of different process steps, AI can be useful in step 2, 5, 12, and 18, but it's not some silver bullet where there's just AI sprinkled on the assembly line as a whole.
Yeah, because I saw, in your process, and I really, really love this because it kind of separates you guys from a vendor. That's your team really gets integrated with the team, right, for the client, and really understands, because of course that's how you're going to know. But what have you seen from, I can only imagine from the client side, they have someone else that's external comes in, kind of understand. Is there usually like a friction between how do you have that to make sure that it's a very copacetic, sync between you with Switchboard and then with the client?
Yeah, that's why we like working with mid-market businesses, because yet to actually see our work lead to any sort of mass culling of roles or anything like that, because there's always so much more work to do. And that's kind of the framing that we bring into the business when we're chatting with people of our goal, because we've said no to a few clients who that is their sole purpose, and we don't want our team have that weighing on their shoulders. We don't really want to partake in that. So the goal is, how do we get people more time back to do more important work? The goal is to get rid of the busy work, which is we see it firsthand. I would argue it's roughly 50% of most IC's work every week is busy work of some sort. And so the goal is to get rid of that so that they have more time to focus on more important things. And we're pretty open about it. We say that like our goal is not to replace your job. It's to make the job you actually signed up for more effective, because usually the first few questions we'll ask them is like, if you think about your average week, split it into a pie of time. What do you spend your time on in kind of those big chunks? And almost always, it's 25, 30, 40% is meetings, replying to Roy in finance to see if procurement signed off on something for the 9th time, updates some spreadsheet no one's going to look at for the 20th time this week. Like all this stuff that is just wasteful and not fulfilling. That's the stuff that we want to get rid of. And yes, it might be necessary for the business to have this data or that process to happen, but does a human need to do it when the human can do much more important things in the business? So that's the approach that we take when we're vetting clients to work with. And when we come into a business and start working with people, we're pretty clear that like that's our goal. And usually at that point, sometimes you can literally see the shoulders relax and go, oh, okay, we're in this together. Yeah, I don't want to do that stuff either. Let's figure it out. How can we get rid of it? And it becomes very collaborative.
No, I love because I can only imagine you hear a lot of, and I'm sure even from the employee side, that there's so much that you hear of these layoffs, more on the big tech of like these layoffs with AI. People fear that you just want to understand how my job is so you can just cut me. And so it seems like, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on it, is how do we educate, and how do you educate like employees and clients, not just on the leadership level, but from the employee level, from the mid managers, from the workers? How do they adopt AI successfully rather than just using it as a meeting summary or with, Copilot? Where do you think as it goes forward, what have you seen, Justin, in the space as we continue to evolve?
Yeah, I think a lot of the SaaS companies pose it this way. A lot of kind of call it freelancer folks who are trying to help people with AI or solo proprietors tend to focus on like, how can we help the CEO get an inbox summary of their week every Monday morning? Or how can we, to your point, like help people summarize meetings? We purposely have stayed away from that. We don't want to work on that kind of stuff. Our goal is to look at a business as a multiplayer environment. How can we help with AI and automation when you have multiple people doing multiple roles in multiple tools with multiple data points? And I think that's where the value actually is. Like these, fly by night SaaS startups that, we help an agent to replace your go-to-market teams. Like those don't work. Everyone knows it. So stop saying that. And on the flip side, go down, if someone says, how do we summarize our meetings? Like go download Granola, Fireflies, Zoom Companion. Like you don't need some complex, robust system to do a lot of the simple stuff. But I think a lot of people, that's all that they know. So going back to education, it usually starts with, are you looking for the analogy I've come to use? I don't think I made it up. I saw it somewhere and I've run with it, but it's kind of like video games in terms of that solo video game versus a multiplayer environment. And AI tends to function the same. It's very different when you load up, I don't know, Resident Evil or Uncharted or Mario. It's like, it's just you with guardrails and a predetermined story and you're working through it, versus you log into Fortnite, Roblox, Call of Duty. It's you and 100 other people with no guardrails, and it's a free for all. And that tends to be how businesses work. It's essentially a free for all. Yes, there might be 10 people in customer support, but every single person probably has a bit different workflow. They might use the tools in a bit different way. And those 10 people then have to interface with, 5 other departments. And those all have 10 people in them that they all do things a different way. And so that's the framing that I give to execs often is, are you trying to solve for single player workflows or multiplayer workflows? And if it's multiplayer, that's where, yes, it's more complex to solve, but it's way more valuable and you get a lot of time back for people and the business can function a lot better.
I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to ask about that on the single player and the multiplayer side of AI. So, and I really, that analogy, hits home, like, because it breaks down of where now you're thinking into, again, as you're saying, multiple people. And I think this is the caveat now to where you're seeing is governance, AI governance, the agent governance of what you're seeing forward, with my, Agent 365 ongoing approach of now it's $100 per license, but it's kind of adding in these pieces of how are you governing these sub agents. So how has Switchboard kind of adopted, like, in these, as it's continuously evolving, how are you, Justin, kind of keeping with the times? Because I'm sure with you coming from an engineer now, with you as the co-founder, you're more on executive. You're talking to more on the deal making and kind of really thinking through on more on solution templates and building out. My first question is, was that change of mindset hard for you, or was it quick for you to kind of come through? And then the second question was that agent piece of how is Switchboard kind of adopting that and seeing how the trend is going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, on the first question, I'll make it quick because I'm sure people want to know more about the agent side. It was pretty straightforward for me because I find my thesis that I feel like has been proven out time and again over the years is most business challenges are human challenges.
Yes.
I think McKinsey has that stat of like something like 65% of digital transformation projects fail. What they fail to disclose is like 90% of those failures are the change management part. Technical stuff is usually almost always solvable. Doesn't mean it's easy. In your role, it's not flip a switch and it's done. But if we assume that most business challenges are human challenges, that's really the conversations I have of, how do you think about, to your point, maybe that's a segue to the second part of your question, how do you think about data in your business? And usually with non-technical folks, they're like, I don't know, we have a SharePoint and I heard about a data lake for some tools. But usually it's education through showing them something. And sometimes they bring it to us. A quick example, this whole vibe coding era is actually really nice for us because some people can't articulate their ideas, but they can build something that articulates it better than maybe they could explain it. So we had I had a CEO that I was chatting with a few weeks ago, and he said, I vibe coded something for HR that we've always wanted. And I know it's not right, but like, this is my idea and I'd love to chat about kind of making it happen. And it used a series of agents on the back end to grab data from different points and bring it all together in one platform that they could easily pull up whatever info they wanted about, performance, salary history, the projects that someone is on and their effectiveness on it, all that kind of stuff. And so he just assumed we could start building this thing and it would function great. And I was like, where did all this data come from? And so he broke that down a little bit. I said, can you imagine giving this to an intern? You as a CEO, of course, can type in how's so-and-so doing, and it pulls up their salary history and their performance review history and private notes and whatnot. What about an intern who joined the company 3 weeks ago? Like, his goal was to roll this out to the company. And I said, what about an intern that joined 3 weeks ago? Should they be able to pull up your salary history and everyone else on the leadership team or anyone in the company? He's like, oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
So simple things of, yes, from a technical side, governance is more important than ever, but it's the mental model of like, if you tag your data, you have it in the right places, it still doesn't account for the fact that an agent doesn't know unless you tell it who should be able to view what. And so making sure that you're thinking of that from day one is super important in these multiplayer environments.
And to the fact of it with, and I want to get your thoughts on it, because now that with vibe coding, with Codex, with Claude Code, there's an abundance, as you've seen, of people ramping up GitHub, of putting out a agent of what it can do. And there's just, there's so much noise that blocks the signal. So, and it goes into my piece of it. And this is kind of like what I've learned is just on people not understanding, to your point, the architecture and think of it from the other viewpoint. If another user uses it, how does that workflow go into it? So with that being the case, with now code is now become so accessible that it can build out, where do you see, what is your thoughts on moving forward, how the trend is? Because now it seems more on towards now it's the experts on, to your point. Are you thinking of this? The architects on our end is like, okay, how's the networking in place? How's the security in place? How is the governance? So what are you thinking of as the years go by and it becomes more accessible, what it's going to look like for businesses?
I think there will probably be a couple very public blunders that will scare enough non-technical folks into be like, right. There's experts for a reason. And I think internally in companies that'll probably happen too. But I think it'll largely play out like cloud digital transformation did, of like DevOps as a role was an amalgamation of things that used to exist but didn't have a name, and now it's called DevOps. But 20 years ago, that role didn't really exist in the way that we think about it. Even maybe 10 years ago, it barely, in the way that it exists today, of like everyone who's in engineering, when you say DevOps, you tend to know exactly what that person does and what it means. But it was created out of thin air, out of a need because of the transformation to cloud and, being able to host something on Azure or Google or whatever it might be. And I think it's going to be the same here. Of everyone's still figuring it out. I think that's the main thing I say to engineering folks, like, well, what are we going to do about this? What's it going to look like? I was like, let's figure it out. Like there is no playbook right now. And I jokingly said to someone the other day, of like, anyone who claims to be an expert in AI is either lying to themselves or to you, essentially. Like there is no expert. We're all figuring it out because the infrastructure is so early. But it doesn't change the fact that the foundations that we've all learned about still stand. So that's why I always say kind of rely on the experts. There shouldn't be a world in which the CEO is vibe coding something for a multiplayer business environment and deploying it to the company if you're over a certain size and your data's all over the place. They can, but back to my point of like, they'll probably learn the hard way of what compliance, security, data architecture actually means.
Yeah. There's so much that goes involved and that you don't think of. So it's so interesting how again, it's commoditizing, but it's so broad now. But again, as you said, I think over years, it's really going to kind of showcase what's really working, even with vibe coding, with all of these LLM agents being able to do so great. There's still, this is what the humans are needed for. So with Switchboard, man, like I was just curious, like I'm real curious on what has been working well for you guys. Like what are you seeing in the next 6 to 12 months that you've seen that has been working, and that where you like to see moving forward with Switchboard?
Yeah, I think the things that have been working really well is getting people humans to understand happy path versus edge cases. I think a lot of people don't realize that in their business, a business is largely built around what is the happy path of whether it's a service, a product, an app, whatever it might be, from when you've got a lead that is a customer, client, or user, all the way to, you finish with them and they've paid for the service or app or whatever it is. That life cycle, you're optimizing for a happy path of if everything goes according to plan, this is how every part of this workflow as a company works. But what most people don't realize is there's a ton of edge cases, and it's the edge cases that drown people in busy work, admin time, hacks, and workarounds for things. And so the thing that we've seen work really well on the human side is getting all of the edge cases out of people's heads and making those as deterministic as possible. Because you can't really use AI if every single time something goes wrong, we have to escalate it between 6 people and we have 3 meetings about it. And then there's an email where someone makes an ad hoc call every single time. When people come to us with that kind of workflow and they're like, we want AI to handle this. It's like, how? Like you make a different call every time. You have no guardrails, no kind of rules for yourselves, let alone how do you give something to a computer? So getting people to think about things that way of like, how do we make our outcomes more deterministic, more kind of in a technical way? Is it binary? Is it a 0 or 1, or is it a yes or a no? And that logic tree thinking in a business, that's what's been successful for both us and clients, of like being able to use AI more on the flip side, when they can't do that, I think just realizing it's the things that are deterministic and don't have a lot of edge cases where you can apply AI easily in your business. And so those are the places to start. And as kind of a ranking, if a exec team is thinking about where do we even apply AI, it's those areas that, well, the process is pretty good already, so we can probably apply it there easily.
So with that, with, people that are listening in, are business owners and so forth, as that kind of like get started, like what do you think that business need to start to build in-house versus when they want to, in your point, when should they test out or, build out within a sandbox those single player agents versus, okay, this is scaling. I need to be enterprise ready. I need to kind of get it to scale. When do they know that it reaches that point to when they want to bring someone like Switchboard in to help advise with that?
Yeah, I always say start with single player, like for folks that I chat with who are still thinking about it and they're not, looking to engage with us, and not that this is a pitch for Switchboard. It's more of like a way of thinking. I always say to them, like, then start with a single player, like start with, it might be an Excel file that only you have or a process that only you know, but try to turn that into a skill in Claude Chat or ChatGPT or whatever tool that they're using, and try to make just a skill for yourself. And if that works, then think about how do you take that skill and apply it to other people using it. And it's kind of this hub and spoke model of like, for if you can solve for you, what are the different spokes of the business that you work with, and how do you take what worked for you and build it out for them? I don't know if that answers that, but usually that's what I frame as a starting point.
And it does. And I want to help, because for the folks that are usually not, because you and I could talk more about the hub on the hub and spoke side. For people that don't understand on a simpler approach on how would you be able to break down, like, okay, what is hub and spoke? So obviously it's the hub, thinking of it as central, and then the different, but how would you explain that to non-technical folks that are on the business side, on the leadership side, to break that down?
Yeah. So CRMs are usually a good way of thinking about it. If you have let's say you're a professional services company that has clients, usually they'll start in a CRM. And so that CRM has the information about them as a client, which is, who's the main contact, what's their email address, what's their phone number, what's the company they work for, what service are we providing for them, what are we charging, etc. If that starts in a CRM, but finance, they don't want to use the CRM because they're generating invoices and doing the books month-end reconciliation and an ERP or QuickBooks on whatever it might be. That hub and spoke model, if you view the CRM as the hub of that data where it starts and originates for that client, the spokes are the other areas of the business that will extract information from there, whether it's integrated directly and they don't have to think about it, or they have to actually go in and, they're copy pasting, they're exporting, they're rekeying it in on two monitors, whatever it might be. That's that hub and spoke model of where does data start in a business for whatever the service is. In this case, assume a client or a user or whatever it might be. Where does it start and where does it go that isn't in that system? Those are the spokes.
So, and then with folks understanding of like, okay, that sounds a lot like more on, and I'm coming at it from the, from the persona of a business owner that they don't know much. How does that work with MCP tooling? And now you can have different connectors now of, HubSpot that they can connect to Zapier. You can connect to it. So again, you're digesting all of this data into one piece, but now you would need to know how, I think, as your approach of putting together like a RAG or some sort of piece to know where each data goes into it. How does that, when you're hearing with business leaders or hearing the new models or the new advancements of what Claude or what Gemini can do, how does that work in regards to how they pull in that hub and spoke model to help them get to their business to pull that data and put it into the right pieces to help, push forward their model or for their internal knowledge point of their SharePoint or with their repository? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I that's why I tell folks who are non-technical, like, you explain the business logic, we'll figure out the technicals all together. Because it's kind of like saying, well, I just bought a car, but it's just the body of the car. Like, should I put in an engine? Should I put in seats? Should I put in a steering wheel? It's like, well, you kind of need all of it, but like, are you going to do that? Do you really need to do that? Like you tell us where you want the car to go and we'll build in the parts that you need, or it might be a spaceship, or it might just be a bicycle that's needed. And I think the acronym soup of MCPs and APIs and like all this stuff just gets overwhelming very quickly.
Oh, it does. It can.
And so I view it as inputs and outputs. At the end of the day, abstract away all the acronyms and fancy tech or even old school. The API has been around for decades now, but it's inputs and outputs. What is the input that a process needs and what is the output that you expect from it? How that data gets in and out, you want to make sure it's secure and logically connected to other things, but there's 10 different ways to do it usually. So inputs
and you know, going back, you know, when I was working with, when I was consultant days, when I was an associate architect and I was underneath one of senior, he's like, Solomon, just keep it 0 and 1. There's so many ways to do Terraform modules to make it look great and to push through and the logic that goes through, keep it simple, because when we ship this out, we have to do a knowledge transfer. We need to build out. They need to be able to understand and clear cut. And if you put in all the fancy dribbling, like keep it all cool, then it doesn't. The simplicity always wins over complexity. You only build upon it. Do you think that's still the case of it here? Just always simple and then put in as necessary?
Yeah, well, I would say there's 2 branching paths. There's one, which is it's a complex system and therefore the connection between that complex system should be as simple as possible. Or alternatively, I guess this goes back to some of your previous questions of what we're seeing, but the math is becoming so much easier to say, like, then why do we need 19 spokes? Why don't we just build one better hub that does all the things that we need? And usually I'll say you should not try to replicate all of NetSuite or all of QuickBooks or Stripe or like kind of these tertiary things. But your main kind of workflow in a business is becoming, and we're seeing it with our own clients, where something that would have taken, you know, call it 18 months and 3 or 4 software engineers to build is now 2 developers in 6 months. And so the mental math that they can do to say, well, even if we are hosting this ourselves and maintaining it, the fact that we don't have to have 6 different SaaS tools that add up to, you know, double or triple the amount to host it. And we're building something purpose built for us. They say, well, forget all this integration and kind of fly by night, you know, MCP between 9 different things. Let's just build a better mousetrap and say custom software with AI weaved into it is the answer. And we're seeing that more and more because going back to mental math, it's just an easier yes for people nowadays.
So with that, and to your point, I'm curious on the side, for Switchboard, like and for clients, my question is just on where are the challenges that you're seeing that you guys are working towards, that you're solutioning just for Switchboard itself, and then what you're now seeing in the market for clients right now that you're resolving, and what are some the blockers that you're seeing right now, challenges in the field? I
would say it's still largely education for folks, just the sheer amount of overwhelm and kind of, there's still a ton of snake oil. You know, there's for every one account on a LinkedIn or Twitter that provides good value, there's 9 who are like, this changes everything and the world is flipped upside down. And it's like, what? A new API call was announced or whatever it might be. So education, helping people, like we try to partner with clients through the lens of like, let's cut through the noise and the BS out there and figure out what's actually valuable for you. On the technical side, the thing that we are paying close attention to is the infrastructure around AI. So the models themselves are becoming quite good. Like if you can set up the right, as it's come to be called, the harness around AI, and what they really mean is the infrastructure. If you can set that up well, then the models actually can accomplish a hell of a lot more than people think. The issue is the infrastructure around it, in terms of what are the inputs? Are they clean? Does it make sense? What are the outputs that we're expecting at a programmatic level? Does that make sense? The inputs and outputs is really the hard part. The actual model's ability to reason and make judgment calls and whatnot is actually quite good if you're focused enough on what you're trying to solve, and not just let someone run wild and say, well, we just want one source of truth that does everything for us. It's like, but that's not how a human works. You don't hire one rocket scientist to build a rocket at NASA. You hire an expert rocket scientist who has a team who can handle, well, the metal and the fuel and the physics of the launch and whatever it might be. I'm no rocket scientist, but the same analogy stands of like, you can't just hire one person to do everything. So why do you think your AI should be able to do everything in the business that you need? So getting people's head wrapped around the infrastructure and the inputs and outputs is something that we spend a lot of time on. And then for us, it's just making sure that essentially the outputs are useful to people. I think that's the big thing is there's a lot of hype around AI where people are like, oh, cool. It gives me a summary of my meeting. It's like, but we're way past that. We can have, if you build the agents the right way and the infrastructure the right way, it's not only the summary of the meeting, it's okay, put the action items here, and action items 3, 6, and 9 can actually be done by the AI by the time, you start work the next day. So building out that infrastructure, but the infrastructure is very kind of like the cloud transformation era. It's very young and evolving quickly. So keeping on top of it. But the fun thing right now is the cloud infrastructure, like cloud managed agents is.
Yeah. And that's to your point in the, kind of summarizing up. I think that's what we're seeing a lot. And that's where I kind of push through is you're seeing a lot of, even in the cloud space, in the multi-cloud space, that a lot of data sovereignty, people kind of wanting to own their own data and, have it go into guards of, why you need to put this into your own space. Do we need to think of a hybrid model to where it puts into that data into somewhere, depending on compliance or if your business handles that. But the key points now is having that infrastructure is, into our company that we focus is just on those PaaS services, those platform as a service, whether you're in Gemini or even if with your GCP or AWS or Azure, building that out, and utilizing it now because Claude or now you can just have an app registration and kind of connect it a service principal, and then it can connect to any of your infrastructure for it to be with, and you can use function apps to pull triggers and to have service buses to pull there's a lot of that you can do, but I think that's the part where it gets so technical to your approach of educating and keeping it simple, and here are the pieces and the architecture that works around. Is that what you think so? Is the case as well? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's getting folks to understand, like, yes, we can build the software itself that would have taken 18 months. We can now build in 6, but there's still a huge effort that goes into the infrastructure behind the scenes for the AI to work well, and evals and testing and iterating. And I'm sure and you've probably seen yourself, like the very first time you build a prompt that sits inside of a workflow to help do something for someone, the output usually sucks.
Right.
But you got to start somewhere. So it's that first time prompting and then working with a subject matter expert to say, okay, this is what you deem as good output. This is the output it gave us. How do we make it better? And it's that iterative back and forth to get a prompt from this sucks to holy crap, this is doing it better than I ever did, is not a switch that flips overnight. It is an iterative process. So it's that time that you have to spend to get it right. But once you get it right, then it's off to the races and set and forget kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, man. I'm just like how it is. And again, it goes back to, I think your point, you nailed it on the head. It's just that education and, training the non-technical people, how this works and what's the solution? How are we solving the pain point? Here's the life cycle of that. So I love it, man. So with that in regards, I always ask, clients as coming forward, with AI just really advancing and pushing through it. So if you had a magic wand, Justin, with AI, what would you love to see AI, either remove a pain point, or what would you like to see in the next 5 to 10 years that you would love to have AI do for you or for Switchboard in the business world?
Yeah, well, with how quickly things are moving, like 5 to 10 is a big time horizon. So I would say call it on the shorter end in 5, because I think it'll actually be quicker than that, is the context windows. If I could wave one magic wand, it would be the ability for AI to handle a lot of information at once. That's where end users who are all they know is ChatGPT or Claude Chat, they see it themselves and we see it too, which is you can only, just like a human, you can only give it so much information before it loses the plot and it starts. That's when you see hallucinations. Yeah. And so we're starting to see good workarounds for that of, sub agents that have their own context window compression, like you said. The classic, what isn't really old school, but feels old school now, which is RAG. Like there's a bunch of different solutions, that mitigate it, but I don't think we'll truly see AGI until there's a research breakthrough on memory. in context windows. So that is kind of, if I had a magic wand, if we could solve for that, I think everything else that we're hoping for out of AI comes after that.
And so with that, man, I've really loved, Justin, because like I say, even in the beginning of the call, I was so interested because with Switchboard and just even on your website, I have your showcasing out of, you're really eliminating, what I really like is taking those manual processes of people don't think about 15, 20 minutes and you're really accelerating. And I think that's the big key is acceleration. That's really for businesses and pushing through and really educating the sale case. That's not something the executives or leadership not thinking about, but for the middle manager and for the other people working day in, day out, it's removing it and they see that. So I appreciate you coming on, man. But, for folks that are listening in and they want to learn more about Switchboard, where can they find you? Where can they follow you, Justin, or where can they learn more about Switchboard?
Yeah, the URL is just with switchboard.com. So if people want to check that out, and then they can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. If they want to reach out, feel free to DM just Justin Watt on LinkedIn. I'm sure you've got the URL that you'll put in the show notes, but
yeah, I'll make sure
if anyone has any further questions or wants to talk shop, that's how they find us.
And so with people coming in, I guess to kind of leave it with the audience is when they come in, what is, in a one sentence that you would say, what can Switchboard really help for the small to medium business, for the professional services, or for on just across the verticals? What would you say really having that book call of what Switchboard can help with?
I always frame it as we're here to get the business and the people in it time back for more important things. There is a multitude of things that happen in a business, and the majority of it is what equates to busy work. And our goal is to understand how the business operates today and how it would operate with AI helping take care of a lot of that busy work. And then we build that together.
Right. And I love it, man. For everyone joining in on the call, thank you so much for having us. This was Justin's. Again, we'll have him make sure in the notes to have more on Switchboard. You can be able to follow him, go on the website and see, on how Switchboard can really help and take away that manual time again, to more towards that automation. So, and if you're needing any help on your cloud side, on the DevOps, Solonox is here at solonox.net. We can really provide that conversation. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you now on the next time. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the AI Advantage. If this episode sparked an idea, share it with your network. Subscribe for more no-fluff conversations on how smart tech drives real outcomes. And if you're ready to future-proof your business, let's connect at solonox.net.